People think that if you're a cannabis person, you're lazy. You can't achieve great things. You can't show up for on time for something. All this stigma, all these lies that have been told. It's the same with the formerly convicted or the formerly incarcerated. People just don't believe that they have anything to contribute to society, and the vast number of people, with the exception of a few hardcore career criminals, the vast number of people, man, when they effed up one time and they're in jail, they're not going to eff up again if they just have enough of a fighting chance to rebuild their life when they get out.
Hello and welcome to Different Leaf. I'm Britt Smith, officially starting a movement to celebrate the end of election season because that was a long couple of years. Now that the 2020 elections are finally over, hopefully we're all able to breathe a sigh of relief. And if you're not quite done stressing yet, then maybe you can breathe a sigh of relief with a bit of OG Kush in it. I've heard that helps. In case you didn't hear, voters passed every single cannabis-related drug initiative in every state where it was on the ballot this year. Yes, even in Mississippi. We'll have more on those new laws when we hit the cannabis news a little later on. While most of us can now enjoy our new freedom of smoking some good sticky bud in the comfort of our own homes, that's definitely not the story for everyone. We might have medical marijuana in 35 states plus DC and recreational weed in 15 states plus DC. But at the same time, there are also around 40,000 people, mostly black men, who are still locked up in the US for offenses like cannabis possession or low-level sales. Thousands more people have marijuana-related crimes on their records, and countless others have lost their lives to the violence of militarized policing. These criminal justice issues largely sprung from a racist government policy from the 1970s, known as the War on Drugs. And while the War on Drugs policies are still largely being enforced today, there are also hundreds of wealthy entrepreneurs who bought cannabis business licenses from their state, and now their companies are raking in billions of dollars every year. Don't worry, the imbalance in this system has not gone unnoticed. My guest this week is Andrew DeAngelo, one of the co-founders of the Last Prisoner Project. In 2006, Andrew and his brother Steve DeAngelo set up the famed Harborside Cannabis Dispensary in Oakland. Then they started working on changing the state's cannabis laws and on criminal justice reform. In September of last year, the nonprofit The Last Prisoner Project officially launched to do exactly as its name suggests, to free every last prisoner still behind bars on cannabis-related crimes and set them back up for success in society. It sounds like a monumental task, but Andrew says it's a vital part of moving forward towards real criminal justice reform in the United States. Can you tell me a little bit about how the Last Prisoner Project started out and what the original vision was like?
Sure. Well, Steve and I, my older brother Steve, many of your listeners may be more familiar with him than myself, but we co-founded Harborside in 2006. And up until that point, we had been cannabis traders and activists, I guess you'd say, in the legacy market or illicit market. And we didn't like being criminals, so we took the money we made and we changed the laws, including the laws in California. And we've always had this connection to cannabis prisoners and people that have been busted for weed. We ourselves have been busted for weed, and many of our friends and family have. And so when we opened Harborside, we had a little program where people could write letters to cannabis prisoners, and in exchange for that, they would get a free gram of medicine. And then more recently, my brother Steve was hit with the idea for Last Prisoner Project when one of our friends who's serving time in Pennsylvania, or was at that time, for driving 14 pounds of cannabis across the country. And my brother was sitting in a boardroom with all these MSO executives and folks from publicly traded Canadian companies, and people were talking about billion-dollar deals, basically doing the same thing that our friend Chuck had been doing and was in jail for. And it all sort of hit him at once that we needed to do something about this and sort of continue our work now that at least I had exited Harborside and I had a little extra time on my hands. So the idea of working in this area of social justice and particularly getting cannabis prisoners out of jail seemed like an area that we could do a lot of good in, that wouldn't be super competitive, that nobody would get angry about us doing, and we might be able to do some good to those in our community that have been most forgotten. So that's kind of where it all started. We've been around 2 years. It's about a year since we got our 501c3 status. So officially we're 1 year old as of September, but we were working on it about a year before we got the status. And, we're slowly, this criminal justice reform is a very slow process. The criminal justice system in this country is designed to inflict a huge amount of punishment on people and to make it very, very difficult to stop that punishment from being inflicted. Each person that we're trying to get out of prison, it can take us months and months, if not years. We've gotten a few people out, I'm proud to say. Most of the people we've gotten out have been under emergency medical furloughs from COVID. So they're not technically out, they're paroled. So they're in home confinement in most cases. And in theory, they could get locked up again once the pandemic passes or for some other reason. So it's very hard to get people out and get their records cleared. Once people are out, getting folks record expunge is another thing we do, and that's also hard to do. A little bit easier, actually much easier than getting people out. And then we also try to help people re-enter in society. We have support, not just for re-entry, but while you're locked up, we send people money for their commissary accounts. We help people with their children and their families that are left at home, go to better schools and things like that.
It's such a huge task and such a necessary thing. How did you even decide where to start on such a major project like this?
Well, Steve and I have been around a while doing this, so we benefited from a lot of experience, and we knew that it had to be a nonprofit organization. We knew that the cannabis industry was going to have to drive the funding for this organization. We were in a unique position. Our Rolodex has basically everybody in the whole industry in it, and so we were able to quickly activate folks. And we never know how these visions are going to go. We get lots of visions like Last Prisoner Project, and we start activating people in our network, and everyone's like, I'm not sure that's such a good one for me. But then like this one, everyone's like, wow, I want to help. We were able to very quickly build some momentum. We developed some cool programs, fundraising programs that allow cannabis companies and cannabis consumers to help in an easy way. Consumers, the main program we have is just we ask people to give their change when they buy weed at a dispensary. They give their change to a prisoner, just whatever it is, 20 cents, 50 cents, 60 cents. And then that all adds up. And we have actually dozens and dozens of dispensaries who participate in this program. And we've literally raised six figures in dollars from people just giving us their change.
Wow.
So that's been a very successful program. And then if you're a company, you can put a little logo on your packaging and give us a little money every month. And in exchange, we give you some support, marketing support, so you can let your community know that you support LPP and get them activated too. My brother and I know how to design programs like that are really effective and that snowball. So we've been able to do that from the benefit of our own experience and our own, time as operators of cannabis companies. We know how to raise money from operators without being too big of a burden. It's really hard for cannabis companies with the taxes and the regulations and everything else. It's hard for folks to be charitable. So we try to make it easy.
In Massachusetts, at least, I'm not sure about other states, but when a business opens up here, they have to have kind of a social justice arm to them. Do you find that you work with a lot of companies who are looking to give back to the community like that?
Yeah, our growth really skyrocketed after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all the rest we've had since then. It's just been terrible. But there were a lot of companies who didn't really have their social justice house in order, if you will. And so they very quickly wanted to do that. And we were just one group that benefited from that. A lot of other groups, Cage Free Cannabis and Social Equity and .org and Veterans Alliance and a whole bunch of other groups. And that's what it takes. It takes a village to do this work. And in Massachusetts in particular, I think there are quite a few dispensaries that are in the Roll It Up for Freedom program. I'd like to get more. Massachusetts is one of those places where the companies are under a lot of distress, and just to do what is necessary from the state and the towns in Massachusetts can be really, really tough. But at least on paper, what Massachusetts is doing is great. I know there's been a lot of problems with that execution and implementation. So I hope it'll improve as time goes on.
It's definitely slow going here. It took a good few years to really get everything off the ground. But, one thing that we haven't seen as much of here in Massachusetts that I've been seeing in other states and other cities, and it's something that you guys work towards, is expungement. Just one prong of this fork of giving prisoners freedom again is to get them actually physically out of the jail. Then there is the expungement of their record, because otherwise, a cannabis offense on your record, that can hold you back from jobs and housing and a litany of other opportunities. It really just kind of stops upward social mobility, So there's so much that comes with the idea of criminal justice reform around cannabis. And I just feel like maybe that's a place that our state really isn't following through on the expungement and the supporting people re-entering back into society.
Yeah, I would love to see quotas on cannabis companies to hire the formerly incarcerated for cannabis. I'd love to see that. Companies would probably not like that and think it's too intrusive of government. But the companies themselves are not doing it on their own. Mm-hmm. They're just not right now, and whether that's because they don't care or they're not as able, the end result is the same. Expungement should be easy, and we find it very hard. Getting somebody out of prison who's been convicted and exhausted all their appeals, okay, I guess that's supposed to be hard, but expungement. Expungement should be retroactive, and it should come with legalization. It should be retroactive. You shouldn't even have to apply for it, really. Maybe a little postcard you send in somewhere, it says, expunge my record. Here's my social security number. Or my record number from my case or whatever it is. You want to use to track it. It should be easy, and it's not. And it's because just like we cannabis people have all this stigma that comes with us, there's all this stigma. People think that if you're a cannabis person, you're lazy, you're not, you can't achieve great things, you can't show up on time for something. All this stigma, all these lies that have been told. It's the same with the formerly convicted, or the formerly incarcerated. People just don't believe that they have anything to contribute to society, and the vast number of people, with the exception of a few hardcore career criminals, the vast number of people, man, when they effed up one time and they're in jail, they're not going to F up again if they just have enough of a fighting chance to rebuild their life when they get out. Going to prison is a traumatic thing. It's like going to a concentration camp. It really is. Okay, these are not like dormitories you go to. These are like hardcore concentration camps